Hello everyone, today we make our summer backstage episode, as always taking this time to discuss essentially the channel trend, what's going to come next, and thinking about Schwerpunkt in a broader sense. You know that the old, once upon a time, lost in the mists of history, Schwerpunkt used to update the channel every 100 videos, making, in fact, 101 dedicated to what had happened along. Then Schwerpunkt decided to better align with the cosmic order, passing to a 90th video for the channel update that he also decided at some point, influenced by sort of different inputs, to title the backstage, right? Dedicating every season like this video to what's going on. In a midsummer evening, we discuss what's been going on, not just in the last 90 days, because frankly, this was also the moment we used to look at stats, right? Channel stats and everything coming with those. But let's say the trends have remained chiefly unaltered, like the channel has kept growing. There has been a further stabilization or continuous growth. You can't quite measure anymore a channel merely on the number of subscribers, especially for the older channels, or at least the ones that got lots of subscriptions, mostly back in the day. This is not really the case for Schwerpunkt, that has acquired mostly the wide majority of the subscribers in the last couple of years, really, even though the channel is several years old. This is also not like a video on the history of Schwerpunkt, but we have to reason in a chronological sense. Besides, Schwerpunkt is a cancer and he crawls back, words in time, and that's why he's a historian, etc. And he's born in summer as a consequence. And but I've also decided to add, as you can see here, inspired not much by the medieval Berry video, but the paintings of the Très Riche illuminations. Très Riche du Duc de Berry, as sort of general vibe of the time passing and the seasons alternation, which is something I've always found substantially romantic and to frame at some point in a video or another. This, however, probably still requires a video about, say, the concept of time, made a video about the concept of space, especially in tradition. And if anything, these other aspects are more a matter of entertainment than anything else. Nevertheless, when jokes aside, when we look at the last 90 days, things have, again, mostly gone similarly in trend to the others. There have been ups and downs. There have been new series. We start basically, what was it, May the 15th, if we account for the fact that not all months, of course, are of 30 days. That was not a phase blessed by a particular amount of views, but let me check that. And this is also completely normal. Normally in summer, views go down, right? There is just in September normally a spike, which we can in fact evaluate on a yearly basis, and that tends to be in fact similar. If anything, every year there are ups and downs caused by other dynamics. We didn't do badly in the last year or so, right? We have actually increased, this is interesting, our view time, watch length compared to the previous year. However, subscribers have gradually we have acquired over 7,000 subscribers, but this is the point. In the previous year, in particular, for different reasons, we have gotten more, and it's a substantially larger amount, like, 10,000, over 10,000, maybe 11,000 something. Part of the reason is always the same mechanism. It has to do, of course, with the fact that on YouTube it's plenty of people who post constantly, and so Schwerpunkt doesn't necessarily appear out there. The format is what it is. So I've never pretended to be particularly more watched than than other channels, nor to suddenly boom or becoming so-called viral, etc. There's always been a strategy of saturation, as I called it, when I first started the channel, that seemingly does yield substantial results, in as much as some videos are really continuously watched, and they, thanks to the top fixed comments, etc., bring ever more people on the channel, but also through different other videos, in fact, that sometimes surprise me, even for what are the odds that certain videos are going to get commented on, well, made so much more and better at a point. And that's what's frustrating about YouTube, really. It really makes you see things in perspective. Most people who come on my channel to stay are simply saying, oh, wow, I like this is what I'm searching for. They're normally quiet, decent. They don't. I really evaluate more the silent, what I think is the silent majority, as a matter of fact. In fact, I see an enormity. I don't check frequently, but every time somebody becomes a subscriber, you can see who they are, unless I think the settings are private or something, and I can see all of you. Right, I can see at least for whichever mechanism, just the ones that I presume is just the ones that allow their subscriptions to be publicly seen, and it's really a lot of people, especially a lot of different people, with evidently, just from the thumbnail, the name, etc., a character, some kind of other general interests. If you click on them, you can see also normally what they in fact subscribe to, what kind of channels they are, what they upload themselves. And I hardly hear from any of these, from the majority of these, on a regular basis. I think for obvious reasons at the end of the day, and mostly the fact that YouTube definitely does not incentivize to stick around more than much, to have any deal of kind of interaction. People are legitimately here mostly to watch whatever stuff is uploaded. And so there doesn't seem to be any bigger need to do else. Many upload their own stuff, videos, shorts, some of them. I realize that the majority of people who subscribe tend to be, of course, through different indicators, tendentially aligned with my wavelength, let's say, in terms of broader political, moral, cultural background, but not always, because it's also different really the individuals vary so much. We can't even properly understand what they have in mind or why they're here, and so on. There are also ever more people reaching out just for the sake of, also privately, by the way, for the sake of thanking me in order to ask questions about the channel that we often address in the question and answer series. At least I receive way more questions that I can answer, and it's fine. Though more than else, these questions seem oriented toward, let's say, what people would like me to cover. Not so frequently. I'm actually about to commit the dreadful act to make a YouTube survey regarding the favorite type of content we are here for. Unfortunately, the trend of sort of the migration era getting more views than the rest has somehow stuck, right? If anything, not much in terms of views, but the notion that my channel would primarily revolve around the migration era, this is not really the case. There is obviously a lot of that content that at some point must be conceptualized in a broader perspective, and so there is always something to add. But the true reason why people prefer that is that they don't have, let's be honest, the mind properly to focus on the more developed and complex history, politics, and warfare of the later Middle Ages, which is actually way more compact. There is way more to know. It is sort of much more amazing in different ways. Obviously, the archetypal attracts. Not much, because the migration era was an explosion of archetypal reinvigoration compared, for example, to the ancient world, right? But for reasons that we all kind of understand in this day and age, at least from what people come from, etc. And so it's a presumption of archetype that is, in my opinion, very often proper, at least if it is there, because the archetype reads everything, right? You can read everything through the archetype in turn, but it's just like mostly wishful thinking about what history actually is, and wanting mostly to substitute it with some kind of strange and quite, say, feministic fantasy of presuming that reality bends to your own, again, made up concepts. This is not just bad because I, of course, have a background and I'm making this videos also explaining quite in-depth things that I presume most people do not really get, or they don't come on the channel for, per se, right? Which is also a bit the reason why the channel doesn't probably explode, because if we evaluate this in strictly historical terms, let's be honest, by now we're by far the top quality history channel online. There is no doubt about this. By the breadth and the depth of the topics covered, in the way they're covered, in the broader sort of glue that connects them all together as a single production and through my own control and command, so to say, there is nothing else, anywhere else. All right, this is not just YouTube. This is just a completely different thing from anything we've ever seen. It just does not follow the rules of the site, which is, again, the reason why I never really searched for that kind of explosion. I, of course, encouraged you to share, to bring this content as far as possible. I've seen this rare, still despicable attitude of saying, it's a fortune that Schwerpunkt is a small channel. Why? Because the only logical reason to such a statement would be that if my channel became bigger, I would probably alter the content in a way that's not the same. What kind of idiotic statement even to make on my own channel? For that, you must share as much as you can if you really have any interest in my content. Even if you were to jealously treasure to thinking that other people don't watch it, believe me, there are millions of people that have watched my content. So you're not that originally, controlling by trying not to share more than much. I say this because, of course, these are all the avalanche of really irrelevant comments that I also openly speak about. That, as you know, has always been a Schwerpunkt's policy. And as always, in this policy, I never really met any person who had, sadly enough, anything to challenge about my actual historical content. I've never met a person who sat here and said, okay, this thing that you said, let's say, even in non-antagonistic terms, is, I know this because of this source and this other that can be interpreted like this and like that for this reason. And there is this guy who, for example, explains that and why and how. So therefore, I think that this idea may be incorrect or wrong because you say this and that. Zero, right? In millions of views, I've never received a single person who actually made a minimal criticism to the actual historical content other than leaving passive-aggressive, phrenestanic comments like, you're not objective, where are my comments? Yeah, well, if you make Russian propaganda on my channel, I'm going to of course, not to see, or you should be actually consider yourself lucky that I don't ban you straight away, as it happened also to especially people who insult, etc., because I don't like to block people. I don't like to actually even filter the comments that are automatically filtered from YouTube, but also without any other intervention automatically deletes them after, I think, a month and a half or something. And so an overwhelming amount of them, including positive ones, are completely useless, right? For example, just to make an example, the comments I don't publish. There was a guy who was even literally like making a compliment. There are lots of positive, actually most of the comments that I don't accept are like, given that the wide majority of them are all incredibly positive about the channel are actually positive ones. Remember that video about kings and generals that I made criticism of? So this guy comes on my video, watches it, and says something like, kings and generals, is, I don't know, his view was bad, whatever. And he said they should have stuck to battles. What? I have a doctoral specialization in battle reconstructions, and which are also recognized outside, of course, of YouTube as, Schwerpunkt battle analysis. Somebody noticed them as well. And the same level of superficiality. Say that video was not to say that kings and generals was garbage or whatever. It was just like an actual criticism about their content that obviously is a YouTube tailored one and nothing else. But it's the same level of superficiality they exhibit on battle, general military history content. They don't make that kind of in-depth or particular valuable analysis of the art of war, but even just military historical topic. They do the same identical thing. There's probably a mechanism, a philosophy, a mandate, and you can easily see that from the video. So in that comment, that was my own sort of volition. Like, why should I even publish a comment that says something I don't believe in, right? And I could make an entire video explaining why it's wrong and false, and especially considering how much we have actually explained this. I mean, if you have watched any of my battle analysis, for example, that comment was not mutually exclusive in that sense, but let's say that's how you make, on YouTube at least, a minimally acceptable battle analysis. The usual, again, 15 minutes with sponsors in between and just, art disconnected also from the general, possibility of an act, or even how do we know, for example, that the terrain was like this and the battle unfolded in this way? That's the actual history of it, right? The entire problem of reconstructing a battle lays in that, because a battle went only one way, right? So even if we don't know certain things, we should try to explain why the battle went in a certain way and how it makes sense. Like that, they completely skip it. This is something that, again, other channels don't even care about. Hence, I will not tolerate even a comment that says something that, again, I actively make the opposite content of. In critical and methodological terms. Besides, I must say that in this regard, the overall flow of comments is always going in the same direction. Overwhelmingly positive. And a few people were pissed off for, stupid dominantalistic reasons, and a few, but very few, I mean rare. It's months that I don't have somebody asking for a bibliography, for example, thankfully enough. Also proving that, in fact, the wide majority of people absolutely get the thing, also because I made lots of videos on the topic. And most of them do not really need to be repeated or to be, acquainted with the concept to understand that it's kind of obvious to operate in the way that I do. And again, the only, say, 50% of comments also that don't pass are things like making a statement on which I talked approximately, 30 days in a row, summing all the videos that I made. Obviously, these are not going to be there, all right? It's been there since the beginning of Schwerpunkt. At the beginning, I gave it a shot. Then it started degenerating in this nonsense where a 7 words comment is supposed to be the disclaimer for a 2.5 hours long video. Well, the difficulty on YouTube is to retain people's attention. If the only thing they're going to get away is the first thing they read and then jumping out 5 seconds after the video begins, or even, 10 minutes later, that is not going to help anyone. Right, my work is very high quality. It requires to actually study it to understand it. If you're not qualified, if you don't have a specific background, it's going to be extremely difficult to grasp any of it. And I see it continuously from the comments, including the ones, "Oh, can someone explain me why Catholicism existed before Christianity?" or this kind of stuff. Like, it's not even about the comment. It's the realization that this, if you are on Schwerpunkt, this is a huge, huge, huge library. And if you haven't realized that, you're part of the problem, all right? Because as soon as this thing will be noticed for what it is by a mechanism that is going to be able to promote it, people will remember that they stuck for years to a channel that wouldn't surpass a few tens of thousands of subscribers, while it was actually the best thing that could be used, I don't know, at some educational level for a complete approach to certain specific topics. This is a huge issue, right? And fortunately, it gives me also food for further videos, right? I've seen there are Reddit things like people claiming that, I don't know, I shouldn't, what was that thing? Express moral judgment on people because I allegedly never studied philosophy. So, okay, I studied philosophy for multiple years straight in my life, theology including, history of Christianity, history of religions, mythology, compared Indo-European etymology, all connected to the Indo-European religion. I illustrated in hundreds of videos about the history of the church, what the whole deal is. I'm keeping to study this thing on a regular basis on my own. How many of the several hundred pages for each exam that I made on each of these topics, including an entire degree that is titled among the rest, a history of religion, a history of Christianity. You wanna, me to list in a single video. That's by the way a very interesting idea for a sort of video. So imagine a person who's trying to make a philosophically relevant statement that defies itself in the very premise of the entire question. Well, I don't know, and that's the kind of irrelevance that does not deserve any kind of attention whatsoever. All right, and I will happily continue to make these videos, and especially the more this kind of comments happen, the more views and the more money I'll get. So it's perfectly fine. Besides, it's incredibly weird to see the psychology of these people, as if, a person made if you hide comments, because that's also part of the criticism, on YouTube, like, you think you can't be criticized elsewhere. It's open. Everybody can say whatever they want, whenever they want, right? I obviously functionalize the entire mechanism on my own videos, where, again, a dumb comment can play on the weakness of other people's brains without any attempt to even begin to enter in the video itself, in the actual explanation, even the premise that can last for half an hour. So, again, please continue to make these comments wherever, because this is definitely helping the channel to grow. I've been asked also to participate to a Discord server, but for the same reason, I don't have really time to respond, to make further comments. In the last 30 days, I've noticed this. Exactly 1 month ago, I made the last sort of historian video, which the rest have been entirely historical videos, because at this point, that's the only thing that I care about. And even the questions and answers sometimes do not yield so much, so I push for making as much historical content as I can. I've been preparing really a lot of new stuff. You don't know about my very sophisticated game of reserves and how much I can inject in the system, and how I can simply go on vacations and you not noticing. It's always been like this on Schwerpunkt, but it's been dramatic, especially last year's been very, very especially some months, right, have witnessed the skyrocketing of my productivity at every level. I'm also beginning to write a book, right? I've written in a year 3 articles, which is fine. I should write 4, to be honest, but now there is a queue for the submission, so I thought it's better start a book. So I don't know how long it will take before I will be discovered. By the way, interestingly enough, there is yet another discussion online. These are always on Reddit usually, where there is always the thing of the nationality. That is hilarious, because I love to see all the answers, and I know it's incredibly entertaining. And there is a deep research into that. There is, they have been searching properly my phonetics, in the way I sound, in the like comparing, asking people from certain countries to see if I sound like them or if they can recognize them from, I don't know, maybe from some touristic background. They analyzed the my educational system from the hints that I provided. They analyzed the familiar, also the family history, the various backgrounds that I listed, all the thing. And I've been really as deeply struck by the care and attention for that. And it's incredibly entertaining, and I would like more and more people to participate there because it's really engaging, and it sort of fuels Schwerpunkt's magic, so to say. In terms of, however, overall interaction, as I was saying at the beginning of the video, everything has been... by the way, the Discord thing, I don't have time for it, right? I could enter as a sort of undercover agent to, I don't know, to verify that whether there is something worth discussing or not, but I don't care really that much, so I often don't even have the time to respond to the very messages, and I hope that it is not taken for a form of haughtiness or impoliteness. I just really don't have much time. I just work, make physical activity, and then make these videos that, again, have fortunately become very quick and easy to make. Sometimes I'm just very tired. I try to keep like a very healthy schedule. I completely changed my lifestyle, by the way, in a couple of years. It was the long night. If those who followed the earlier Easter egg content, they're probably aware of all the Schwerpunkt mythology, what I went through, all these kind of things. It's mostly an inner mechanism, but it's important. Besides, lots of other things happened in the meanwhile, and I've admittedly felt like I stopped also updating you about the whole thing, because this video's never, this channel as a whole has never been about me as a person, right? There is obviously a YouTube persona that has a broader value that helps introducing the content that obviously, as we've seen, draws, attracts criticism, discussions, curiosity, etc. But it's not really what the channel has ever been about. In fact, I really can't see when the moment in which I'm going to reveal everything. At some point, probably will be recognized for, I think, very specific reasons. I'm not sure how it could happen, but it's obvious that at some point this thing will flow into a single stream, a single river, hopefully swelling and, overrunning everything, flooding into the entire world as a new great flood. In any case, I don't know why I take these dark turns, but there's always a good reason for punishing humanity in particular, rather than mankind. With these times reserves, by the way, I've tried something interesting, namely writing to extremely famous people. Only one, telling the truth. At the beginning of this year, I actually wrote to, I can't say which world organization, let's put it in these terms. I have to be vague because you cannot fully know until things happen, right? But I've actually tried to be, if anything, to enter in contact with certain figures that at that point would, if wishing to cooperate with me. And I really think that they have their own specific interest. They would have their own specific interest in doing so. That for conventional discourse, I'm rather extreme. I can't say edgy because it's never really been about that. It's beyond the edge, if anything, what we do here. But it's definitely something that at a point will be explained, will be noticed, will be further shared. So you are actually the promoters of this. But to make the long story short, because, by the way, I have a series of people I have to right to. If anything is ever going to happen, I am probably going to come out in the open about my identity, and because I have to go there. This would essentially turn into an interview or something, and a public one. So the purpose is obviously helping my message reaching out more. And so at that point, even against my will, let's say if today they contacted me and they said, okay, well, we want to talk with you. Come to America and, in in a month, and let's do this, and then come back to Europe. We will air that, we will have it. Well, it's going obviously to have a drastic impact on the channel. I personally doubt, statistically, probabilistic, that it's ever going to happen, because, again, of the nature of my content, so much so that, it's almost impossible, obviously, to predict anything regarding how, for example, also the same YouTube is going to go, right? Maybe, like, we have been cultivating these channels for a long time, but then something will take over in terms of people creating their own apps, their own view system or whatever, and, this will thing crumbling from relatively a day to another. It doesn't seem to be the case for now with YouTube, etc. I'm personally very skeptical that artificial intelligence is going to simply overthrow like most platforms at this point. If anything, those will be enhanced by AI and ever more functional to what remains essentially a human perspective on the world. It's just my idea. It may be an end of history illusion or some sort, but because things always change, will change. But this is the point. Like, I fortunately, as you know, I have everything saved here, so everything I say is never going to go away unless I die or my properties explode or something like that. So which is a possibility, and the general. By the way, I was thinking about this because I can't find any more of my entire. Fortunately, my doctoral stuff I found it, but let's say I wanted to make a series about my master thesis, and obviously I have my master thesis printed and sent. I can find it in the email, but all the actual the folder where I worked on and all the files, I can't find it. I hope it's in the other place at my father's, I think. Because I lost otherwise, the entire script. I can't have the digitalized version for making the series. I wanted to make this autumn. I will update you about that. As you know, it's about the Battle of Markville, and it's actually very interesting. And I was about to prepare the videos here and now, but let's see what happens. I surely have the digital version, but I may have lost the entire surroundings of that. Well, it's not this huge issue. But just for saying that, it seems that the means on which we are relying on are incredibly weaker, in a sense, ever more volatile, which should be the other way around. I mean, from one side, we have some advantages, from others, not quite. But it's probably the attention of people, what probably this entire world means today. If you read the stats about Generation Z's or whatever are the next ones, mental state is basically, yes, also the late millennials for that matter, which I fit, is literally collapsing at every single level. Then you wonder why I don't allow comments. Because I see the mental illness behind that. It's really impacting, right? And it mostly materializes not in comments of praises for Schwerpunkt, but it just also in that almost passive attitude towards that. And that's what, as I was saying before, somehow triggers me, because, again, I'm making some broader points, and I may understand that the videos are boring, whatever, but is it possible that there isn't more interaction like that? I don't know, videos about kids playing, with a sword in HEMA, by making, also horrifying things like mixing, men dressed as women making lap dance while using weapons. What the fuck? What the hell is that? I mean, first of all, aren't you ashamed of yourself? But secondly, well, evidently not. That may even be a positive. I'm not criticizing the thing in itself, but how can that be relevant compared to actually? And because you see, the point is that there is a basics of actual medieval warfare, right? The feministic fantasy prevails, all right? It's not the actual rigid, objective, accurate art of war understanding, how to actually know an army works and how to make it. No, it's about, oh, look, there is HEMA now, and I show you how this sword actually works. As many people think, actually, look, the sword is not so heavy. Like, we are at this kind of levels, right? And in my opinion, like, if videos like this get hundreds of thousands of views, fine, but it's for them, but the cause may be mass psychosis of some kind. Like, literally, like, brains start disconnecting from reality to a level that is alarming, and that will simply not be tolerated to have. I mean, from this, in this sense, it's an absolute fortune that I fit, at least in the solid fundamentals of having, fortunately, older parents than the average. And again, coming mostly my background, whatever I decided to do with my life, I'm going, if anything, to profit, but unfortunately, of the collapse of a large part of the population, because that's what it's going to get down to. And that's where I think the Schwerpunkt at some point will help, because even though the content is complex, and okay, of course, most people are not going to be interested in that because it's too difficult, apparently. So if this is difficult, by the way, and it is difficult in a sense, of course, but I mean, this is also a kind of content that is designed for people to understand. Like, it's not designed for hermetic purposes. Like, what I'm saying is also basic, straightforward history as it should be told normally, and whichever other interpretation that I have that people still worry about is actually that as straightforward and objective as it can, including the bias, meaning that the bias is not dictating the result, right? Is simply at most framing it, but I'm not altering history because of that. And that's what, unfortunately, most people are completely unwired, or at least they have an inverted logic that prevents them from understanding. In other words, everyone who speaks like me also about some ideological aspects is doing that to promote ideology as opposed to, and I don't even like the term ideology because it's a neutral term, but that is basically bending historical reality, accuracy, and objectivity to some kind of external reason. Absolutely not, right? If you are raised in a world in which most people fake and act, this is especially true, unfortunately, across the Atlantic, not only, but in fact also in the most Americanized countries of Europe. This is not much of a criticism per se, it's just like, I think, a matter of fact by this point in history. You literally have no terms of comparison. I mean, if you really can't frame me in a coherent system other than thinking that I am sort of bending that to historical objectivity to some external shitty deal, that tells much more about your background than mine. And unfortunately, the comparison is not flattering towards your side. In any case, I'm saying this because I could make very practical examples, but if I start making videos to answer every single thing, that every single shade, let's say, even of praise, because most people, even criticizing me, they're actually praising me. They're not saying like this stuff is bad or you shouldn't watch it. It's BS, right? No, there is this thing that I don't like because it's me, not because it's him, and so he should bend to my own sensitivity, or to the fact that whenever he criticizes someone, say in a general sense, as I always do, I don't tell name and surname. I'm talking about general trends of society. I feel described by that, and so I can't stand Schwerpunkt for what he says because of my own inferiority complex. That's also a serious problem. All right, that's not really a good place to be as a person. And I think that it's even a form of success, because if my channel causes this reaction, it's exactly where it should work, right? It's exactly attritioning that kind of resistance that is that would otherwise be sclerotizing and eroding at the same time the few good that has remained in terms of scientific and moral backbone, for example, historical learning, teaching, and whatever. So videos like these are crazy because, you see, I don't speak for an entire month, and so then I need to say literally everything that crosses my mind at a time. But otherwise I would address very specific comments or discussions, etc. that probably at some point I'm going to cover, because I take my time as well. But to cover the stuff in times of need, etc. So people like drama, but it's not about the drama. It's really about being educational about this all and how people's brains work in a such self-declaratory way. You don't even have to actually study what's behind that. It's so self-evident because everything is becoming ever more emotional, right? There is no barrier between what happens and the immediate emotional reaction. I like to stick to the actual evidence, right? And of course, you must be a bit psychologist as well in these instances, because otherwise, you wouldn't be a good historian either. Actually, that stems from studying history in ways that people from especially other backgrounds do not understand. It's mostly about the secularization and the hyper-specialization, or the very superficial education that has literally, like in the span of 10 years, everything has literally collapsed, right? I see it across many countries, many people I know, near and far. It's literally collapsing. Everything, like saying the value of individual humans has drastically dropped at an unprecedented level in history by this kind of, not just in absolute terms debatable, but say properly as a generational divide. It could have, technically it depends on what kind of parameters you use, it could have already happened, but in this way, at least to the level of closer to the zero point, it's really a problem, and especially because otherwise our civilization works pretty well, right? And so you can't but see an individual failure in that, even when it's part of a collective issue, as always. But it's always the same thing. Who does keep things standing, right? The system by itself never been like that. If anything, if you think like that, you're already done for. But that's also what I don't want to discuss here. In general, what I'm really interested in at different levels is enhancing Schwerpunkt's quality and content. I am in particular interested in increasing a particular type of information, especially the coverage of different times in history that we still haven't covered. There's a lot incoming, especially about modern contemporary history, not just warfare. So this is really the thing that I've been after. If you realize, actually, in the last year or so, there has been an unprecedented level of that content arriving. The reception has not been so great, I must say. For example, I'm utterly shocked to see how American military history is completely skipped. Like, I made, for example, a video on June the 6th about the Pointe du Hoc, the Rangers storming of the Pointe du Hoc. I made recently a video about the Battle of Midway. I've done other things, including the other day, which one was Howe's British military doctrine tactics by the time of the U.S. War of Independence. These videos have gotten an incredibly low amount of views, especially former, but to an unprecedented level in comparison to what views have tendentially been between the ratio of views between a video and another on Schwerpunkt. And so at that point, my question is it like there is already so much about that around? Or, because I don't know, I have so many Americans among my followers, like a 40% total, that may say, okay, we've been hearing this from such a long time, from everywhere, we don't need to listen to that anymore. Which is strange anyhow, because I can understand that, but I'm not sure it's the case. My mind actually tells me that there is something ideological about that, right? People are literally forgetting their own history. This is a problem, again, particularly pronounced in the United States, in as much as the American past has been specifically demonized. All right, coming from Europe, of course, you can't look at your fascist past and say, well, okay, that was bad. But nobody is saying, well, as a country, we're kind of bad. Or I don't know, if we are looking at the history of our past generations, or how, I don't know, the country, well, of course, America is a different thing as a colonial country compared to Europe, but in general, right, our left hasn't basically demonized our country the way it has become. On the contrary, it seems like there is a divide that I pointed out before existing between more or less Americanized countries. And I say Americanized because literally it's part of that. If you take Northwestern Europe, especially Britain, obviously, there is going to be a particular feeling for the United States, and without digressing politics, but we know what's the issue in general, right? And it's a fortune actually not to belong to a country that is so much in the eye of the general storm. Unfortunately, because it feels like European history, individual European countries, national histories are neglected in a way, and this is incredibly strange because regardless of the country, there is always something that, especially in Western Europe, you can't point out as being foundational about proper Western identity coming from whichever country. And whenever I often listen to American political commentary, including also British hosts, etc., and it's as if Anglo-Americans literally lived in this bubble where they are the only thing that exists out there. And it's not ignorance, it's self-referentiality, which may be even worse in a way. And it can be also both things at the same time. This is true also for Europe. Like, it's not like in Europe we know, American history or society well. For example, I'm shocked to see how few people understand American politics today, right? There is literally a massive barrier. I consider myself lucky because I really watch a lot of American political commentaries. So even though I'm not an expert in the American, say, institutional and constitutional system, checks and balances, how everything works in thorough detail, because generally speaking, there is also so much you can know, but in order to understand what you need to understand what's going on. But those kind of things, I don't know, Trump is like Putin, right? Or especially this comes from the allegedly enlightened liberals, the ones that say, for example, are intelligent to understand, even as military men, as people that follow the war in Ukraine, supporting Ukraine, but completely failing as Europeans, and in this sense as Westerners, to understand what Trump is specifically doing about that, which is not the best thing that could be done, but it's absolutely not some kind of, again, satanic figure. What was, that the American position at this point is also strong and sort of violent, at least in the modes. They are still basically doing nothing about that. It's as if the Democrats hadn't learned anything from what just happened. And it's also positive because indeed what conservatism is doing, at least at the top level, is relatively acceptable as a pragmatic direction, as always when you are in charge to a degree. But there are also lots of MAGAs that are basically sabotaging their own government and trying to distort everything possible to do so. Why I'm talking about this? Well, because whenever I make this videos, I really think how all this can be relevant, and unfortunately, history and the way it's taught is exactly the key to this, because it seems as if people were simply living in the present without realizing what are the forces that are pushing this. Like, if you have a particular ideology, if you are from a particular side of the aisle or whatever, it's not like it's an issue that began yesterday, right? Where do you draw the line? Where do you think your values come from? What are your standards, actually, especially in a moment where everything is collapsing, as we're saying, from a mass standpoint? I mean, people with power and money, so potentially older people at this point, do not seem to have been overwhelmingly, at least, affected by this loss in cognitive abilities, in sort of properly reasonable checks on behavior, the collapse of conscientiousness, for example, etc. But the kids that are going to come next, so these are going to be, unfortunately, the next doctors, the next economists, the people who are going to, at some point, have to take control. These people are completely broken, right? And the reason why they're broken, of course, is also the immediately previous generation and their enormous shortcomings and limits. But what I would like to say is, generationally speaking, we will be at some point craving for some kind of standard and point of reference, right? That's why it's difficult, for example, I was saying before, to presume that any of these political commentarists that I'm trying to reach are ever going to actually talk with me, because most of what they're doing, even in that context, is marketing an idea, is the notion that basically there are the rank and file person is some kind of respectable, decent, intelligent, capable, industrious individual. It's gone, right? Even if that had ever existed, which is not actually the case, presuming to appeal to the non-radicals by presuming that the majority of people are actually like that is the first. It's simply going to skip the entire problem of how to solve the collapse. That will simply overwhelm anybody left sort of moderate in the picture. And so the entire system will fall itself, and then you will be whining about it. What did we go, when did we go wrong with this, etc. And, just standing there and, for example, providing with a guide to do things, but without explaining where a motivation should come from, demotivation should come from. What is the root cause, which is essentially a sin, an active sin and sabotage for all this collapse, not some kind of external factor that is crushing people, that therefore would like to be seen as martyrs, to be victims, to be comforted, right? That's the entire thing, being parasitically maintained without doing anything, without growing a backbone, right? That is not, again, going to be fixed by that. We need something immediate as a point of reference, culturally, ideologically, morally. There is no way to surpass this in the moment, all right? But especially searching for such a solution in that world. And again, if your point is most people suck, of course it's difficult to market that. But if it is true that the people who are going to have the backbone are going to be better guided, because let's be honest about this. As I was saying before, most people come on this channel and think that, I don't know, I'm just a random guy who is trying to market his own historical opinions or hypotheses. This has nothing to do with that. Like, the history itself has been subordinated to a broader comprehensive effort of reality. This is not a story, all right? It is a method that I'm putting forth for people to autonomously understand history in an objective way, right? So that's the only thing truly that my history is subordinated to. It's not a story, because people really have this sort of notion, and especially YouTube tends to fuel that. After all, history isn't it a sum of little stories, right? Of videos you can watch for like 15 minutes, not too much, or is it about shorts that really kind of shows you how this soldier looked like? Wow, and then you can't distinguish, like, even why IA sucks, for example. And in general, what is that actually makes real quality in things, as opposed to, because that's the collapse of standards, right? It literally passes through the inability to recognize what is worth or not, because essentially what is worth requires more intelligence to actually to work on it, to finally understand that. So it's obvious the Schwerpunkt has to pass through different avenues. It has to start discussing topics that are also less comfortable for at least, more or less the traditional lens of the channel has been put forth, right? But in that regard, I must say that most people actually follow, right? They understand at least the general point that I'm making, even though I've never found, again, a person out there, for example, enucleating this kind of belief in something accurate or coherent, so that probably I'm going to be, if I'm ever going to reach any minimal popularity, the most misunderstood person ever. And again, the internet fuels that, and especially like in the age of AI, it's also going to be another challenge, but let's not simply talk about that because it's another story. But when you think about what this channel can be, it should transcend YouTube, right? I have some kind of, there can be ways of doing so, of course, in the future. If YouTube is to be surpassed, it has to happen for something that is obviously more functional, more effective, unless something deleterious really happens in the broader picture. That in that case will be probably something that will be more important than the loss of YouTube in and of itself. But and that's why I wanted to create, just banally, a map, right? There are sites that do this stuff. I've been checking it, again, with this reserves of time. The possibility of having, saying, different maps based on centuries of the world, and for each region inserting some links to the various videos that talk exactly about that time and space covered by Schwerpunkt. So, if anything, picturing the extent of Schwerpunkt's work, right? The extent of the global breadth of this kind of content. Because this is what it's becoming. And I'm very glad about that, because content-wise, as I was just saying, we're going to expand also in other directions. I'm understanding that, of course, having made videos mostly about the Middle Ages and seeing that, in fact, those videos get more views, I should fundamentally stick to that. And, of course, I'm going to remain there, right? We're not going to end any of the content that we're doing, by the way. It's more like, how do you, let's say, how do you integrate this content, the new content in the older one, then simply surpassing the older one? That is not going to happen. That is going to remain, at this point, the bedrock of it all. There's not a place where it's going to be surpassed. I mean, it's possible that, of course, one day, if we go on at this pace, of course, we will probably exhaust some branches of the so-called cycle that is pretty big, and some of them have already gone, telling you the truth. In fact, some of these new series are going to take the place of older branches that were eventually completed, right? So it's not like they died out. They're fully integrated now. And as you know, also on Schwerpunkt, we end up talking about the same things from all the possible different angles, as far as they are important and they deserve that attention. So with contemporary and modern history, we're definitely looking at something relatively new, but that I have actually no problem covering whatsoever. The most important thing in many ways is also expanding in sort of civilian history, so to say. It's not going to be the socioeconomic, it's going to be eminently political, eminently also social, yes, to a degree, but also revolving around our military focus. None of what I'm going to upload is going to essentially surpass, again, our more typical approach to it all. I remain a military historian. I don't plan being anything else. On the contrary, as an early career historian, I'm just going to further entrench exactly into what I'm doing. And I must say that I'm also very satisfied with how things are going on that side, because what you see me doing on the channel is exactly what I do in a professional sense, in terms of publishing, in terms, in fact, of writing, etc. And this is been extremely interesting. For example, on Schwerpunkt, as you've seen, I announced that as Schwerpunkt, I published on a military history journal located in Italy that literally contacted me to publish on there. It's just a column, it's not an article. I explained this multiple times because basically they told me that since they receive public funds, they can't sponsor me. But they can insert me as again in a column. That was very fascinating, and you see how gradually things are also going to intertwine. Because on Schwerpunkt, also in the past years, I've received some kind of job offers, interviews. At some point I was paid for some book reviews, etc. as Schwerpunkt, and this is sort of strange. I don't know how, again, in the age of AI, people are going to look at different sort of... I discovered, for example, in the analytics that today we don't really look at more than much, that some people are getting on my channel from ChatGPT, which is interesting because I don't know how. Like the way I imagine it, they ask something like, what can be, what kind of YouTube channel talks about this? Maybe my name came up. I tried myself with Grok on X, and unfortunately they're not very accurate in some ways, but still the random ways through which you can be named, you can be pointed to by this AI systems is quite fascinating, and an opportunity for the channel. Again, I don't know who's going to be favored the most. I just know that these things are, albeit sporadically, happening. All right. That's why I always ask you to share at the end of the videos, even though most people don't get there. And that during the video I don't say that ever because I find it humiliating. At least just to randomly repeat that, oh, please, offer me a coffee or, share this. It's ridiculous. At most, I say something I think is very important in that specific function of the sharing. That is to say, I say, I've already talked about this in this video, or it's similar, right? It's like, look that I've been doing this stuff. I've been covering these topics because I know, by the way, as I was saying before, that there is a lot that is again, it takes time to be understood. And so if people don't know how much there is on my channel, they will lose the best part of it all, right? And this is the actual point. You can't watch Schwerpunkt without understanding its comprehensive character, without realizing that there is a large amount of content that remains completely actual, that is not just what I upload every day, but you can watch, especially through the playlists. I've been increasing those a lot. I don't know how much all of this happens because in terms of, say, brings some actual result, because let's say traffic, I think on YouTube goes by stages, right? There are some levels that you unlock and then you more or less the channel remains on that for a while and then steps up and does like that. And I've seen, of course, that over the years and gradually, even when there is not a major scale level change, there is an increase in the backbone of it all. For example, again, I found really interesting the fact that there are more views and watch length than before, but less subscribe. I mean, not less subscribers in absolute terms, regardless of who watches regularly, but that people subscribe less, but they watch more and consistently more because my watch length is also pretty high. I'd say this much. I know here I could easily look at it through the same stats. This is not important, but if you are on YouTube, please subscribe because that is unavoidably going to show you more of my stuff to you. Very often, this is also a factor that people want to see a given content, but they at some point they just essentially use the subscription like a bookmark, and then maybe with hundreds of channels, you will lose also stuff that you would have liked to you would be interested in or better ways. This happened to me in the past. I used to collect sites, for example, and I skipped one site that eventually would change my entire life, where I've learned so much, mostly from the interaction with other historians, or a specific military history mentor that unfortunately has passed away years ago, and that now has changed the whole thing. And in the way, really, I speak history, speak especially warfare, and that is, I was about to miss at some point. So that's the lesson that I would like to impart. Also because, frankly, it's obvious to anyone who subscribes that my channel is quite peculiar, right? As I said at the beginning, nobody's literally doing what I'm doing. There's no way around that. It's not a matter of opinion. It's mostly a matter of just look at how the whole freaking thing is run. Just look at what kind of topics I'm covering, right? This is not a matter of opinion. This is literally how the system works and how interconnected it is. So YouTube does not make a great job in terms of proposing new, especially the older content, and this is a problem for such a big channel like mine. But if you use the playlist, you will find a lot of that. And it's been all consistent with my work. It's not something that I change according to the topic. It's something that, again, is glued all together. So sharing is the most powerful mean to increase this, because if views go up, the channel perpetuates itself, right? There is not just an active. It is largely true that YouTube works regardless of the algorithm to an extent, but the algorithm also does exist, right? It's there and it's actually enhancing certain sort of is increasing the views of particular content as opposed to else, right? And this can't go unnoticed, right? It's there. It's been a thing, and it would take just one video to get a few tens of thousands of views in a day to just making us step up consistently where we need to be. Again, if you look at the watch length, the average retention, so to say, on my channel, which is also mirrored by the income, by the way, is fairly high in spite of the relatively low amount of subscribers and everything. People tend to stick around when they realize that I exist, right? It's not like they just look at it and pass by. Some do that, but in general, who is exposed to this kind of content tends to stick around because it's obviously telling, it's obviously designed in a way that shows you immediately it's reliable, right? That we're not fooling around, that there is a specific purpose, there is a strong consistency in everything that we're doing here, and that it doesn't end. This is not such a channel that, again, cares about the viral aspect, but is also, just not caring in general about making videos or making a point, at least making views in the sense that people are interested in this can be useful. As you've seen in the Q&A, there are lots of stories of people thanking me for the whole thing. The point being that it's exactly that level of engagement that ensures that this thing never ends in any way, meaning that I'm never going to exhaust the content. But the problem is, how relevant is this content going to be? Just think, I don't know, there are memes online that mock channels like mine, for example, of the people that now have studied 3,000 things and say the most complex thing, etc. And I don't know, all the microphones are, I don't know, in the mouth of the random, person that just comments, makes video vlogging without even understanding, making emotional reaction in front of movies or the same video, history videos, etc. as if they were 5 years old. YouTube rewards the latter type of content. But this is exactly the moment in which we can prove that we're stronger than that. And imagine for an instant, as I was imagining myself before, imagine that my content, at least to a superficial level, was known by, 10 times, all right? The people that Irish habitually. Just think how consequential that would be in terms of the perpetuation of the content. Meaning, and the one that is going to come, meaning people interviewing me, me interacting with different other things, entering broader projects, having the possibility of influencing many other aspects. One of my older, I can say dreams, but things I would like to see, and of course, to influence, historical production of some kind, maybe even movies. I'm not interested in particular in that, but just for making an example, like from politics to religion to history to warfare. You know what Schwerpunkt is? Like the people who have been following me up to this point are the same ones that do not need this kind of talk, right? Because they are truly the faithful ones that eventually stick around and make things work, also for the larger amount of the others. But at the same time, there is way more we can all do, right? It's not like you have to do it for me. You have to do it for the opportunity that this very content has to change the mind of people. It's a completely different story, right? As I said, like if I had been interested in, in the income or in something else, I would have simply not stuck along for all this time making videos almost daily. There is another point that I deeply believe in, and I'm sure that as a critical mass is going to eventually break through in the end, right, at a larger level. This content is precious, right? It can be the cornerstone for a better understanding of, for example, European tradition, identity. Just think about, again, we said it before, all the problems that exist in Europe. Right, I said before the more Americanized part, but there are huge problems in the other ones. They were also increasingly becoming ever more interdependent and similar with one another in that regard. Just imagine if, Schwerpunkt's knowledge was passed to, 100 more per 100 people compared to the ones that it is today. In which kind of world would we live? Would there be a chance for things to change? How could my content be contested, criticized? What kind of barrier wouldn't fall in front of what we're talking about? That's what we really have to imagine, right? This is not merely a channel. You see, it's not merely a channel. It's never been. We've never been there. We've never cared. This is something else. This is simply a medium like another that we're using to revive not just historical knowledge, but all what that entails once you fully understand it. And that's why this content should be also loathed, should be hated, should be attacked, should be aggressed, because otherwise people wouldn't understand. Otherwise people would not be put in front of the actual issues. It's really important, and this is what I'm looking forward to. I would really want to do this, and as you can see, my energies are there, right? I'm not going to give up, because crazy people do not give up. And so the issue of course, that was a joke, not in the sense you should sponsor Schwerpunkt's craziness, but I mean, definitely, we're not, again, on a normal wavelength, whatever you want to call it, crazy or, enlightened or something in between. Obsession or passion. It's the one can't exist without the other, This is the appeal that I make, if anything. Because in this particular phase of my life, I am sort of suspended in a very interesting situation that I never found myself in, and that Schwerpunkt is also part of, in a way. It's so, that I read in things something that other people would otherwise say, well, it's just a random thing. Nothing is random, all right? As much as it's not random that we're here still, or already, meaning that here we're heading towards a count at least by October to have reached 30,000 subscribers. I don't think this is necessarily going to happen, but we'll see, especially what happens in September. And 30,000 subscribers is, it's not that small in the sense that, the bigger channels are 100,000 already. You can say it's a big channel, right? If you are 30,000, yeah, it's a lot more. 100,000 is a lot more, but in comparison, but is it also by scale that far away? Hell no, it's basically there. Like just a further push could easily gap the distance. So again, this is all possible. And I don't know who's listening to these videos, by the way. That's yet another thing I often don't put much emphasis on. But who are you exactly? Right? What are your actual channels, your actual means? I know that most of you are probably regular people. So it's not like you have enormous power of sharing whatever. But what kind of broader paths are you on? Right? What kind of expression sort of can you can use properly to, for example, voice your own ideas, your own thought? Where does Schwerpunkt stand as far as that is concerned? That's a question that one should pose oneself. Like, I admittedly don't make this enormous deal of promotion, because I believe that at large, if this has to work, like, I can't also, I don't have to be impatient. And again, things will really come by themselves. At the same time, there is definitely a time factor, and this can't be simply, put aside. So, while very interesting, this mechanism is also quite like a double-edged sword, and the difference in its use is made by you all. At the end of the day, I can, of course, put the videos on, and I can definitely increase my visibility. I can improve my quality to a degree, but it's never going to be simply that, especially by the type of topics that I discuss and the way I discuss them. It's always going to remain somehow a secondary world, and in some ways we have succeeded already. But much more awaits us. I've always had an issue when making this kind of videos, because it always seemed to me, in one way or another, that we weren't ever properly reaching the bottom of the question, meaning these are very sort of directly, straightforwardly, immediately crafted videos. I'm literally saying whatever I'm thinking at the moment, or right around there, something that is, let's say, presentable, more or less presentable along that pattern. But a question remains also, as if there was some more highly crafted notion that we were all just mostly increasingly reaching through the channel, but almost not realizing from one side how far we went so far already, yet also realizing the actual limit of it all. It's difficult to run this thing. It's more difficult than I thought. I mean, it's actually very funny making the videos and everything, but let's say providing with a guidance for the subscribers, the followers, is actually a very different thing, right? I always take the chance. At some point, I'm going to make a video about this only to thank the members that continuously support the channel, so monetarily wise. Again, sharing as as much as you can, like, and just for the same amount of money, would be really helpful. There are minor news, for example, and for the proof that I'm not greedy, I've set a Patreon account, which has reached some people, not too many, and I don't know how actually effective the site is to collect money in that sense, but I see it mostly as a form of general promotion rather than else. It's oddly similar to Twitter in a way, and again, also on X we're actually rising quite gradually, etc. Again, I'm not tremendously engaging in the way I also post the content. It's just the raw links, but I see that there are people, and I know all of you, by the way. One thing I've never done is to address individual supporters per se, but I know you, I see who you are. I don't really spend time looking at your profiles or whatever, but you comment on YouTube as much as on, at least you share, especially on X. That is very appreciated, liking, share, whatever. And I kind of know you. I kind of have sort of tens of people that I distinctively know for different reasons, even though we have never talked most of the times. Some reach me in private, and that's also where some Q&As were coming from. The more seriously I'm going to take this, all right? The importance, again, this will not steal time, will not dilute the content. As I was saying before, I can't be harsh myself sometimes, but it really meant, like, the idea of gatekeeping for a YouTube channel like this is pretty ridiculous, right? If you really care about any of this, you should be extremely aware of how important sharing anywhere, Facebook groups, on wherever. I don't know. I see here. I could look here because they changed the analytics and it's ugly and I don't like it at all. And I had really nothing better to do. It was really cool, but looking at the external views, for example, mostly, well, anyway, I knew it by heart. It was Google, right? Google search, but there was also, I don't know, Facebook. There were emails that was interesting. It would show, if anything, the type here. Maybe I found it once again. External, not many. Well, in the last, how many days is this? Actually, in the last 30 days, there have been 2,600 and more external views, mostly coming from Google search. Here we see ChatGPT coming again, yet again. I don't know what this thing really is, but let's say there is this OpenAI ChatGPT, or right, searchbrave.com, which I don't know what it is, ChatGPT, Discord, YouTube, Facebook, Discord. I don't know why there are two Discords at the same time. Maybe one is the app or whatever. WhatsApp. Not much else. But it's interesting to see the variety of especially most people watch me from X now, which is an obvious consequence also of my sharing. And again, we have reached there, I think, 370 followers. Yeah. And so this is more or less the picture. I'm not pretending for this to be, I don't know, anything special or sensational or whatever, but I hope that in the general picture, if anything, as you will see, there is going to be something happening in September, and we will handle it together as we've done it in the last couple of years. But we are going to really look at what's coming next on Schwerpunkt. And if you really like it, we'll continue on that, and we will expand, obviously, in an ever more outward direction as well, because we must find some kind of confrontation as well. You can't just be here. We must try, as I was saying before, like imagine, especially if you have conservative commentarists or, I don't know, any person who engages in this kind of podcasting form or whatever, of some relevance, right? It's of course, it's interesting to see Schwerpunkt also in other places in general, but if you have means to reach these people with my content, please do it, right? Because that's the quickest way to make this channel, even without actual anything happening between me and these people, maybe interviews or whatever. We don't need that either. We just need to enter in to be spotted on the horizon, and people will eventually decide, right? But until we are suppressed like this by the algorithm, by the limits of YouTube and the general mechanism that informs this whole thing, well, we're going to waste a lot of good content for very few, right? And this, unfortunately, is what we have been up to now mostly. And again, also the way videos are watched most of the times are really inconsistent, right? You don't understand how or why people watch certain videos as opposed to others and whatever. From one side, I presume that there's been also a slight change in the way people tend to approach the channel. That is to say, since I make this daily uploads, people tend to browse more my content. As I was saying at the very beginning, like you get views from videos that you say, but why are people watching that? Like it's an old re-upload from 4 years ago that a video made 6 years ago. Why would you watch that, right? What's relevant about it? Of course, all Schwerpunkt videos are relevant, but say I made so many more relevant ones recently that it's a bit difficult to actually understand the reasons. The top 90 YouTube history channels, oh god, you watch that too much, right? People coming back to me, by the way, it's just a 2 months old video, say, this is a Schwerpunkt classic. What the hell? I hated that video. I even said that in the 2 days later. Of course, I see here, like, you got 1/4 of the views. Because, drama, people like drama. Stop wiring for emotions. It's weak, all right? It's not a good place to be traditionally wise. Let's be more consistent. Let's do things well, right? Let's be coherent. Let's make things work for what they are, right? It's extremely important. Extremely important. And what else to say? Not much. I'm contemplating here all the specials that I prepared. They're always interesting in a way or another. Sometimes you don't know how to spend them, telling the truth. And but we have, again, lots of very interesting stuff, even though, again, we may not exactly at some point match the exact interests, and again, the days, or there are news that are distracting, etc. But again, I'm sure you're going to like some of the new videos that you will likely see, if anything, in a few weeks, or if anything goes as it should go, but you may never know. For the rest, again, we should be very careful about what we're doing. For today, I stop it here. I just hope that you enjoyed that video. If you did, please share it. Otherwise, leave a like or subscribe to my channel if you're interested in my upcoming content. As always, I thank you heartily for listening to me. I wish you a nice time and see you next time. Bye.